All right, I know you come here for honesty regarding the 49ers. Well, we have a lot of it to delve into. This right here will be the enduring image from this is one of the worst nights in 49ers franchise history. I mean, this is a team that came into 2024, obviously, with hopes of getting back to the Super Bowl, of finally getting over the hump. And we all know that the season has gone exceptionally poorly for the 49ers. Ever since Dre Greenlaw stepped onto the field at the Super Bowl and tore his Achilles, the 2024 calendar year, it's been blow after blow after blow. But aside from being all but mathematically eliminated in the game against the Rams last night, the 12-6 loss to the Rams last night, the 49ers, many of whom, almost all of whom, have defiantly fought through this season from hell, this torturous season, they got a slap in the face from one of their teammates, Devondre Campbell, who quit on them early. And I mean, this is so rare in professional sports because these guys are paid a lot of money. Devondre Campbell signed a contract with the 49ers worth nearly $5 million in the offseason. So you just don't see stuff like this happen once in a blue moon. But when it does, especially within the context of the 49ers locker room, which has been straining to field the team this year, just straining to do it, doing its best to try to get over so many things that have afflicted it. And then Devondre Campbell did that. He walked off the field. The anger in that room was wildly palpable. I can tell you that. George Kittle is never mad. Like, I've covered George Kittle since 2017. He's the second longest tenured 49er. Kyle Juszczyk is the longest tenured 49er. Kittle once was asked, do you ever have a bad day? And he said no. Always trying to be positive. Yes, there have been moments of sadness. The 49ers have obviously suffered some crushing defeats over the years that I've covered the team, and George Kittle has been there. But he's always tried to keep an upbeat spin on things. I had never once seen George Kittle angry until George Kittle spoke yesterday following the game. That probably was the most angry that Kyle Shanahan has ever been. Let's just watch, just so you could soak in the atmosphere and understand how mad the 49ers were.
Said he didn't want to play today.
Play today?
Yep.
The coaching staff?
He did when I asked him why he didn't want to go in. So.
During the game or before?
No, that was in the third quarter.
I mean, he's a professional. He's been playing for a long time. I mean, if he didn't want to play, he shouldn't have dressed out. He could have told him that before the game. So I feel like there was some sucker shit that he did. Definitely hurt the team because, D went down, and we needed a linebacker, and I think Flan was named up too. So for him to do that, that's some sucker stuff to me, in my opinion. Like, it's probably going to get cut soon, so, it is what it is with that.
Not disbelief or disconnection, like, as a team. That is one person who just decided not to, play for his teammates, and I don't think that doesn't make our offense look at each other like, wow, man, we're falling apart. It's more of or like the defense, hey, we're falling apart. It's more of one person making like Mooney said, a selfish decision, and I'm with Mooney on that. And I've never been around anybody that's ever done that, and I hope I'm never around anybody that does that again.
You juxtapose that against what Dre did tonight. What was that like to watch?
Voice my own opinion in the moment. And now we're past that moment, so it doesn't matter what I wish I could have said or wish I could have done. But I don't like distractions on the sideline. I think that's ignorant, and I think it's just dumb. It's just stupid, and it's very immature. And I just don't see how that's I just don't see how you can do something like that to your team.
George.
From a competitor's standpoint, that is as low as it gets. There's such a respect in the 49ers locker room that the team culture dating back to 2017 when they first started building this thing. I mean, when I first started covering the 49ers, they lost their first 8 or 9 games. I still remember being in the locker room in Philadelphia on a rainy day against the eventual Super Bowl champion Eagles in 2017. Joe Staley had broken his orbital bone. It's like your eye socket bleeding from the orbital bone, and it just this hushed murmur in the 49ers locker room because they couldn't get a win there at the start. Yet they kept on fighting, and that was a team that went from 1-10 to 6-10, the first team to ever do that, and that set the table for all these very, very entertaining runs that we've seen 2019, 2021, 2022, 2023. I mean, all of that's happened over the past several years, and it's all been built on this foundation of fight and respect. And it's a culture that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have worked so hard to build. And then you have what happened yesterday, and that's what makes it so jarring. That's what makes it so angering for the 49ers. That culture has been built on the opposite of a guy quitting on the team, especially in a moment when the team needed him most. This was a close game, and the 49ers season was on the line. And, the probability wasn't good that they were going to make the playoffs and somehow scratch and claw their way to the Super Bowl. But that's not the point. In this league, you fight until hope is extinguished because, you never know what's going to happen. And even if the fight in any particular season ends up without a trophy, there is a certain honor to uphold, and there are off seasons to set up to hope that energy can carry over into the future year. It's never a one-year thing in football. There's always going to be another season in the NFL. Whenever fans are especially crushed at the end of one, this is what we said after playoff losses in past years. Regardless of what happens, 49ers and the NFL are going to be back in 2025. They're going to be back in 2026, which is why the quit within one season, because of what you can accomplish in that year toward the stretch run, even if you haven't made the playoffs, that's why the quit in one season is such a forbidden thing in the NFL. It's the quitting on your team, walking away. That's the one action that locker rooms, especially good ones, just cannot tolerate, because you're giving up on the hope of 2025, the hope of 2026. Now, Devondre Campbell was a one-year plug-in for the 49ers. And I wrote about this up on the San Francisco Standard. They wanted to sign Eric Kendricks, who agreed to terms with San Francisco, but did not sign on the dotted line, changed his mind before he did that, and ended up signing with the Dallas Cowboys instead. So the 49ers went to Devondre Campbell right after that, and it was interesting to say the least immediately. This is the article up on the Standard. You can sign up for the membership to get this in-depth coverage. But Campbell signed, and I have it in this line right here. The 49ers signed a linebacker to a one-year deal worth nearly $5 million back in March, right around the time Campbell was taking to social media to blast the Green Bay Packers, his former team. And I think the ink had already dried on Campbell's contract. I tried to look at the dates, and a lot of the social media stuff was on March 17th. The 49ers signed Campbell on March 15th. But the first thing the guy did after signing with the 49ers was trash the Packers, who he had played with before. And then if you go back to his time with the Packers, he didn't speak particularly fondly of his time in Atlanta, which was before then. So the 49ers, I think, hope that, okay, we just need a Band-Aid while Dre Greenlaw is out. And that they hope that their locker room would, keep Devondre Campbell in line. I mean, the 49ers, between Fred Warner and, this is a team of superstars, right? That they hope that there would not be this drama festering inside of their own locker room from Devondre Campbell. And then as soon as he signed, he started talking about the Packers in that negative way. And I think, in situations like this, if you're the new team, you hope that you don't become like one of the former teams. The Packers and the Falcons, who Devondre Campbell played with before, they never had to deal with what the 49ers had to deal with last night. He never walked out on those teams. He might have blasted them on Twitter, but he never walked out in the middle of a game with the team's playoff hopes, the last dwindling portion of them on the line. Close game. I mean, they needed every stop they could have gotten at that point. It was a one-score game or a tie game at the time that this happened. That never happened to the Falcons or the Packers, but it did happen to the 49ers with Devondre Campbell. Now, Campbell has yet to explain himself. He wasn't in the locker room when we entered after the game. I think he had long since left the facility. So all that we had to sift through was how angry the rest of the 49ers were. And I think that it immediately turned into a situation where the 49ers were trying to salvage things and preserve them for the future moving forward to next season. George Kittle talked about Talanoa Hufanga breaking down the team. And this is how I ended the article up on the San Francisco Standard. And I don't think that it's an accident that they picked Talanoa Hufanga to break down the team after the game. And he said that his mindset and attitude will be 100% effort on every single play, every single day, every practice, every rep, and he will fight until the wheels fall off because he has been fighting his ass off to get back on the football field this year. The season's not over, Hufanga said. We still have games left to play, and if we don't show up, there's no reason to be here if we're not going to do that. So I'm going to show up every day. So right now, the 49ers are in the business of, guys who are free agents at the end of this season. That includes Hufanga. That includes Dre Greenlaw. You're auditioning for your next contract. I think that Greenlaw and Hufanga are both putting on good auditions to be back with the 49ers. They're showing that they're built to the right stuff. But not only are you auditioning individually, you're also trying to preserve the integrity culturally of a core that's seen a whole lot of success over the years, but I think felt existentially threatened by what Devondre Campbell did yesterday. Because if guys start walking out or deciding that they're not going to play hard when times are tough, you're not going to be ready to deliver when times are good. That's just the way that it works in the NFL. The 49ers prided themselves so much on overcoming what they did in 2017, from 1-10 to 6-10. 2018, the Jimmy Garoppolo ACL tear. 2020, they came back from 6-10. 2021, they were 3-5 at the start of the year, and they ended up in the NFC Championship game. 2022, they're 3-4 at the start of the year. They ended up in the NFC Championship game. The 49ers prided themselves on the ability to fight through adversity. So when something happens like this and Devondre Campbell walks off the field, regardless of whether or not he's been with the team for several years, they view that as a threat to the culture of the team. What happens with Devondre Campbell moving forward is going to be fascinating. The 49ers will either cut him. Charvarius Ward opined that he may be cut soon. They could suspend him if they want to make sure that he doesn't have a chance to just go and sign with another team. Although I don't know, this breaks the code in the NFL to such a degree that it might be a toxic situation for anybody to pick up Devondre Campbell unless there's an explanation for this that we haven't heard yet. But they obviously have to deal with this in an effective way with 3 games left, so that they properly finish whatever's happening here in 2024 and enter to the 2025 offseason with the cultural foundation of the team intact, because this is going to be a big roster replenishment offseason. It always has lined up to be one of those, right? But you absolutely do have to make sure that you enter it with the right vibe in the building, and there was so much anger that vibe was thrown off yesterday by what happened. Now, it wasn't just Devondre Campbell yesterday. They obviously missed a player who they needed. I mean, Dre Greenlaw's knee was sore in the second half. We never expected Dre Greenlaw to continue with the 49ers yesterday at 100% snap rate. And there was a very good chance they were going to need to plug Devondre Campbell in at some point, especially after D. Winters suffered a neck injury. So that hurt the defense, but there was so much more for the 49ers yesterday. And I thought that it all began with Kyle Shanahan and a broken game plan. The very first play of this game, Kyle Shanahan force-fed the football to Deebo Samuel. And we know that it's so funny because the talk of drama and, lack of team behavior had centered on Deebo Samuel in the days entering this game when he tweeted that he's not struggling, he's just not getting the ball enough. And we all know what that means in football terms. And that means give me the ball more. I mean, at least even if Deebo Samuel didn't mean that, that's how it came across. And it's sent bad shockwaves through the 49ers ecosystem. The 49ers seemed intent on obliging Deebo Samuel yesterday, and I don't think that was a good idea. I don't know if they were intent on it, but they seemed intent on it. That was the product on the field. Very first play, slant to Deebo Samuel, who was blanketed by Akella Witherspoon. Deebo Samuel's not your separator on this team. Ricky Pearsall's a lot better than that, even though he's a rookie. It just wasn't a play that, and it was just one play, but it was so indicative of everything that would happen, especially over the course of the first few drives, when they're just handing off to Deebo Samuel, run into a brick wall. It really did seem like they were trying to appease Deebo Samuel. It's like, hey, you don't think you have enough touches? Okay, we're going to give you more touches at the start of the game. And he did absolutely nothing with them. He didn't even get up to 20 yards from scrimmage with those touches. And what happened is that the 49ers, who had a golden opportunity to open a lead while it was still relatively dry early in the game before the rain started coming down, left ahead 3-0. I mean, it was preposterous. Let's go back to the playlist yesterday and see what exactly happened after the 33-yard pass to George Kittle. So here it is. 1st and 10, 12:48 to go in the first quarter. Brock Purdy deep pass to George Kittle for 33 yards. They get all the way down to the Rams' 41-yard line. The next 3 plays, Isaac Guerendo, 1-yard run. Isaac Guerendo, 3-yard run. Then it's 3rd and 6 from the Rams' 37-yard line. So the 49ers are in perfect 4-down territory. You're in plus territory. You have a chance to put a hurt on the Rams. I get it. The first 2 Guerendo runs didn't work, but on 3rd down, you can do something that sets you up for 4th down. What do? Shotgun run to Deebo Samuel right up the middle. The gain's only 2 yards. And I watched that and I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. They're probably planning to go for it on 4th down. That's the only reason you'd run on 3rd down, right? That's what I thought. That's what my silly mind thought. No, on 4th and 4, they bring out the field goal unit and Jake Moody kicks a 53-yard field goal. So, they forced-fed Deebo Samuel for a low probability run up the middle that had no further plan in sight. Instead of setting it up to go for it on 4th and 4, which analytically would have been the correct decision, the 49ers used a worthless Deebo Samuel run to kick a field goal. And that, combine that with that first play, which I thought was just symbolically, it was illustrative of the futility of this 49ers offense, which ranks last in the league in separation. Combine those two things, and the 49ers had set themselves up for their extinction with 55 minutes still on the game clock. I mean, the Rams were at like 1.8 yards per play, yet they were down only 3 or they were tied. That's how big this failure was. The 49ers could have buried the Rams early, and they didn't. This was a broken game plan for Kyle Shanahan, and I feel that he went from his very best 4 days before this to his very worst on Thursday. I mean, we talked about it against the Bears. Shanahan was scheming space. Shanahan was going to screen passes. I think he went to one screen pass yesterday, and it wasn't a 2-minute drill. It wasn't a great time for it. It might have been Deebo Samuel's biggest gain of the day. It was like a 5 or 6 yard gain. But the screen game wasn't there. And here, I get it. Purdy probably went from his best to his worst as well. But we saw that the game plan was set up for failure when it was forced through Deebo Samuel and it was executed without any sense of analytic strategy. With that early field goal attempt that Jake Moody didn't make any sense. This was destined for failure from the very beginning, and it was destined for failure just a few days after Shanahan had put on a vintage masterclass against the Chicago Bears. So from his very best to his very worst. Why did this happen? Well, I mean, Shanahan has been struggling essentially all season. I've talked about him not being able to find his fastball, and I think that he found that fastball against the Bears, but perhaps the short turnaround from Sunday to Thursday in a year where he's already been struggling was something that sunk Kyle Shanahan. Well, let's be fair. Sean McVay wasn't very good on the other side. Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay, they bumbled their way to 5.9 yards per attempt. They ended up running the ball okay, 38 carries, 142 yards. But, I mean, neither offense in this game was doing much. Most of the Rams' damage came late once the 49ers defense was gassed. I mean, the defense was overexposed because the offense couldn't do anything all game. And then we obviously saw Devondre Campbell quit. That didn't help matters for the 49ers. But it wasn't like Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford were great on the other side. In fact, the 49ers dropped a couple interceptions early that probably would have won the game for them. So blame goes all around. But Kyle Shanahan wasn't good from start to finish in this game. From the very first play to the very last one, where the 49ers took the sack on the Hail Mary. Strategically speaking, I think it's always a good idea to blitz on a Hail Mary because then you just never – there's not enough guys back to protect. So the play never has a chance to develop. So you got to give Chris Shula, the defensive coordinator for the Rams, credit there on the very last play of the game. But from minute 1 to minute 60 of this football game, Kyle Shanahan was at his very worst. And it seems like the short turnaround put him into a spot where he reverted back to a lot of the low points of this 2024 season. The off season for Kyle Shanahan is going to have to feature a tremendous amount of self-evaluation. Does it involve bringing in a pass game specialist? Somebody on Twitter mentioned, when the 49ers pass defense really languished a couple years ago, they brought in Joe Woods to manage the defensive backs and the pass defense, and things improved at that point. They brought in Chris Kasarik after the 2018 season when the pass rush was languishing. Obviously, that was paired with personnel additions in Nick Bosa and in D Ford, but it was Chris Kasarik who brought the wide 9, and the 49ers turned it up in 2019. So they have brought in specific staffers to ameliorate glaring problems. The inconsistency this year of the play calling for the 49ers, the systemic, breakdown might be a harsh word, but when you look at the fact that they went from number 1 to number 32 in yak this season, when you look at the fact that they averaged the least separation at catch point in the entire NFL this season, after ranking number 11 last season, I mean, personnel losses here and there don't explain complete tumbles from 1 to 32. In 2018, the 49ers didn't have nearly as much offensive talent. Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt, so they were going to C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins, and they still ranked number 1 in the league in yak. So Shanahan obviously had his fastball schematically in that 2018 season. It's really, really clear that some major soul-searching and self-evaluation, and I don't know if it means bringing in somebody to help scheme the pass game, but some major self-eval is needed this season because all of the metrics that indicate whether the 49ers offense is healthy or not. The stylistic metrics went completely in the wrong direction for the 49ers this season. Now, people want to talk about Brock Purdy. Yeah, he was inaccurate yesterday. He also threw a pass to Deebo Samuel that one of them, his best pass to Deebo Samuel, I don't think was force feeding. I think it was a natural pass to Deebo, a well-schemed play by Kyle Shanahan that Deebo Samuel just dropped. And it should have been a touchdown for the 49ers. And I would say they probably win the game if Deebo Samuel doesn't drop it. But Purdy, on the aggregate, yes, that this was one of the least accurate performances I'd seen from him. And like Shanahan, who was brilliant on Sunday, Purdy was also brilliant on Sunday against the Bears. This took a 180-degree southward trajectory in just 4 days. I thought that Purdy's worst miss was the one to Ricky Pearsall because it seemed fairly dry in the fourth quarter. It seemed that the rain stopped falling. He had Pearsall deep. He underthrew him. And that was a missed opportunity for the 49ers. A couple plays later, Darius Williams picked off Purdy on another deep throw, this one to Jawan Jennings. The line completely collapsed on that second one, but it's just a play that Purdy should not have forced because the 49ers were down only 3 points. You can't throw blindly deep when you're down only 3. That was one of the worst decisions that we've seen Brock Purdy make. However, I have to say this was never a weekly referendum on Brock Purdy, no matter how much certain people have wanted to make it a weekly referendum on Brock Purdy. That seems to be the popular thing on social media. Folks did the same thing with Jimmy Garoppolo. They do it with Brock Purdy now. He's established as a really good quarterback. He has bad games, especially when the game plan is completely broken. I think we can expect the quarterback to have a suboptimal game. And that's exactly what happened with Brock Purdy yesterday. He was dealing with the shoulder a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if that's still a lingering issue. I know I think he was 0 of 7 yesterday on passes that traveled 20 or more yards in the air. So he just was off in that regard. It was wet for part of the game with the rain. It was drier for other parts of the game. All I know is that Brock Purdy in his career has hit over 50% of his passes that have traveled 20 or more yards. So what we saw yesterday wasn't what we've seen over the majority of his career, which is why a weekly referendum on the quarterback is not a smart thing to do. There are going to be ups and downs in the NFL. There's going to be variables moving around him. Yesterday had one of the most intense negative variables that you'll ever see in the NFL when one of the 49ers defenders literally quit on his team in the middle of the game. So obviously there was a firestorm happening for San Francisco. This is not going to change their viewpoint of Brock Purdy. Just like poor games in the past have not, and nor should they change their viewpoint of Brock Purdy. You look at things in the aggregate. And this is still, he's been anywhere between 5 and 8 in EPA efficiency this season, despite the fact that, EPA is so interconnected with what the play caller is doing. You've obviously got to be on the same page in that regard. So despite the fact that what the 49ers were running yesterday was broken, the separation was non-existent, and that's carried over to a lot of this season. We've seen how hard the job has been for Brock Purdy. He's still been able to rank that high. So if there's one relatively stable fixture throughout this entire mess, this hellish 2024 season for the 49ers, it actually has been their quarterback. And they're not going to stray away from that, nor should they stray away from that. It's hard to find a quarterback who brings a sense of stability, and Purdy, by and large, has done that for the 49ers this season. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of his strengths and obviously some of the struggles in the past game. We talk about that all the time, right? We know what Purdy can bring the 49ers. We know what he has brought the 49ers. He'll continue to deliver it at a reasonable clip. He's shown to be that kind of personality, that kind of player. He's a dependable guy. Yesterday's game was way more about the complete collapse of structure around Brock Purdy, and I think that does start with Kyle Shanahan. And obviously, we saw so much anger in the 49ers locker room regarding Devondre Campbell. But, it is necessary to talk a little bit more about Deebo Samuel. Because, this is now overshadowed by the fact that Devondre Campbell he's getting, and he should be. Devondre Campbell and this whole incident should be the focal point of attention, because it is so unusual. It is such an existential threat to a team's culture. The 49ers have to handle this appropriately before they handle anything else. But, there also was a dramatic threat to how the 49ers operated this week when Deebo Samuel said that he's just not getting the ball enough. And I think the 49ers said all the right things, and they said he's a competitor and he just wants the ball in his hands. And then they tried to do the right things. And I'm not sure if force feeding Deebo Samuel was the correct move, and it blew up in their face. And, this is obviously not going to be discussed as much as it should have been because of the Devondre Campbell situation. But we see the lack of separation in the 49ers receiver room as a whole without Brandon Ayuk exemplified by Deebo's struggles. We see the Deebo Samuel drop issues really put on display here. And we see Kyle Shanahan's struggles completely encapsulated and showcased through this Deebo Samuel saga. So how's Deebo going to respond? How's Kyle Shanahan going to respond? How are the 49ers contractually going to look at team building after this year? Do they think that Deebo Samuel has what's necessary left in the tank? Do they believe that he's going to look better next season if he comes back, if Brandon Ayuk is also back? And that's a big question mark. He's coming off the ACL. They need to find a receiving core and assemble an offensive weaponry that makes the job easier for Brock Purdy. It has been far, far too difficult for the quarterback this season. And I go back to the separation stats. I go back to the YAC stats, something that the receiving core for the 49ers has done well, has done it above average or at a league best rate in the past. They're in the cellar in those categories this season. And I think Deebo Samuel's struggles yesterday really, really exemplified that. You got to talk about some of the positives, and we could take Devondre Campbell off the screen right now. Dre Greenlaw's return yesterday. Absolutely electric. He had 8 tackles at halftime when nobody else in the game, even on the Rams, had more than 5. Was all over the field. I talked to guys in the locker room, and I said, has Dre lost a step? It doesn't seem like he has. He hadn't lost a single step. This is a guy who was in a crumpled heap on the field at the Super Bowl at Allegiant Stadium back in February, torn Achilles, 10 months, 305 days later, Dre Greenlaw is flying around an NFL football field. If you look at what the 49ers have done this season as far as just defiantly fighting the negativity, the adversity, the dwindling odds, Dre Greenlaw exemplifies that the best. He's like, no, I'm coming back this season. I'm going to be playing at a high level. And he did it 10 months after tearing his Achilles. Used to be a career-ending injury, still is for many players. We wondered, if he would go the same way as Navarro Bowman, who was a little bit older when he tore his Achilles, but Bowman was never the same after the Achilles tear. Dre Greenlaw is in a position where change of direction, short area explosion is the moneymaker. It's mandatory. So there was real worry that he'd only be 80% of his former self, which could be a career changer in the NFL, maybe even a career ender. He looked 100% explosive in that first half. His knee, I think he bumped a knee in the second half, so it was precautionary. They kept Greenlaw out. But, I mean, he gave him more than they bargained for in that first half. And that obviously led to Devondre Campbell quitting because Campbell refused to enter the game for the 49ers at that point. But what Greenlaw did should give the 49ers maybe some motivation to re-sign him right away if they can. Obviously, we have to check in on Dre Greenlaw's knee. It didn't seem like it was anything serious. He talked after the game, but that was impressive. Anyway, I mean, he's so emblematic of how they fought. Christian McCaffrey went all the way to Germany just to try to get back for his teammates this season, right after signing a big, lucrative extension, contract restructure, but in a positive way for Christian McCaffrey. We see him doing everything he can to get back on the field. He could have mailed it in and said, okay, Achilles tendonitis, I'm going to take 2024 off. No, he went out to Germany, found a way to get back on the field and was an effective player until, very bad luck. He slammed his knee in Buffalo. Talanoa Hufanga, who broke down the team yesterday, came back from a torn ACL, immediately tore a ligament in his wrist, fought to come back, had a club on. That club, unfortunately, might have prevented an interception that could have changed the game for the 49ers. But Talanoa fighting on a day-in, day-out basis for his team. Obviously, personal tragedy. We've talked about that a lot. Trent Williams losing twins. Charvarius Ward losing his 1-year-old daughter, Amani Joy. But Charvarius Ward back at work. Charvarius Ward fighting. The point is that the 49ers across so much of this roster have these guys who have taken the adversity head on. And you heard Brock Purdy talk about it. Kyle Shanahan has talked about it. You find out who guys are when things aren't going well. And I think by and large, the players in the 49ers locker room have acquitted themselves very well, very impressively through adversity. They have showed up through tragedy to fight this season, through injury, through tragedy, and they have fought throughout the course of 2024. And that's what made this so jarring. Because, I mean, I wrote it up here. It seems impossibly ironic that Devondre Campbell was the player the 49ers picked to fill in for Dre Greenlaw. Last night, that decision symbolized a doomed season. Greenlaw might have been at the very top of the list when it came to symbolizing the fight of the 49ers, even when times have been going poorly. And Devondre Campbell was his direct fill-in, and he's the guy that quit on the 49ers yesterday. So we'll talk a whole lot more about everything over the course of today. We saw the new kind of anger in the 49ers locker room. We saw the impossible irony. That's what I wrote about up on the San Francisco Standard. There's Devondre Campbell right there. But we also saw a broken game plan from the very start. We also saw a lot of inaccuracy yesterday from Brock Purdy. Just a complete all-around mess, a disastrous night for the 49ers in a way that encapsulated what's been a very, very frustrating season. They've got to turn it around. They have to find a way to retool the roster moving into 2025. We'll talk about all that strategy, of course, over the next weeks and months. We've already been talking about it right now, but they still have 3 games left. And I think that picking up the pieces and making sure that they finish the last 3 games on a note that can carry momentum into an important offseason is extremely important, which is why players like George Kittle, coaches like Kyle Shanahan, they were so incensed with what Devondre Campbell pulled yesterday. All right. That is 49ers brutal honesty. We will talk to you very soon.